Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Resume Development. My name is Jen Rodgers.
And I'm Andrea Garrido.
And during this workshop, participants will learn how to craft such a resume, both college students and new and experienced professionals. You'll walk away with the tools necessary to create a document that features individual accomplishments, strengths, and interests.
And you will have the opportunity, if you'd like to submit questions, by just typing them into the question pane of the control panel. And you can see in your questions, or send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll try to stop and respond to those questions and address them, as time permits.
All right. So
I guess we can start by just introducing ourselves. As we said, my name is Andrea Garrido, and Jen and I are with Turning Leaf Career Consulting. This is our own career consulting boutique career firm. And just to give you a little bit of background, my background starts in the corporate world, working in the staffing and recruiting world and human resource management. And then when I was, I guess, after about 9 years, I really made a decision that it was time for me to do something different in my career. I wanted to continue in a similar industry, but I knew that a change was necessary, and I began, actually saw the assistance of a career coach at another university, and was introduced to the career of career counseling. So in 2002, I started working in higher education. I worked at Seton Hall University, and then got my grad degree in counseling, and worked with college students, undergraduate, graduate students, as well as alum of various backgrounds. And then in 2010, made another switch to handle a work-life integration. I had 2 young children, 2 elderly parents, and it was time to do something different. So I started Turning Leaf, and Jen can tell you about her. We actually have been doing this now for 7 years, and help people with all different backgrounds, experiences, with resumes, with interviewing. We do groups for people who want to re-enter the workforce or make career changes. So anyone from a college student through someone considering what to do next with their encore career.
So I'm Jen Rodgers, and my background is very similar to Andrea's. I started out working in human resources, staffing, experienced hire, campus recruiting. And after doing that work for about 5 years, I realized I was sort of stuck in my career. I wanted more, and so I conducted a self-assessment on myself, identified what was important to me, my interests, my skill set that I enjoyed using, environments that I'd been in that I loved, and I realized I really loved the college environment, and I loved helping. And so I talked to some career counselors about their careers because I thought that may be a good fit for me. And it was. However, I needed to go back to school in order to become one. And so I continued working in HR for another 2.5, 3 years while I went to grad school part-time. And so after about 7, 8 years in HR, I transitioned over into career counseling, similar to Andrea, working with MBA students, alumni, undergrad students. So between the two of us, we've reviewed thousands upon thousands of resumes, whether it be for actual job opportunities with candidates or for providing students and our clients with assistance. And currently, I work at a university. I work with undergrad students part-time, and then on the other side, the other part-time piece, I partner with Andrea, and we do the work that she described. So, so we're going to dive right in. We only have an hour, and we're going to talk about resume. We will specify if we are talking about things that are very specific to current undergrad students, we'll specify that. If we are talking to experienced professionals, we'll specify that. If we don't specify anything, assume we're talking about everybody who's listening. Okay. All right. So, what do resumes do? Resumes get you in the door. They don't get you the job. The assumption is that when you are looking for work, you're also networking. So certainly the people who you know are helping you with that process. However, resumes are really your marketing material. They inform the employer about the value you can bring to them. And so because of that, you really have to understand where you're sending your resume to. So you want to highlight your work accomplishments, not responsibilities. If a company is hiring you for a specific job, it's most likely they understand the job that you will be doing. You don't need to tell them what the job does. You need to tell them how you made the job better because you were there, how you made the organization better off. So you're going to highlight your accomplishments or achievements, talk about your experience, and the education that you have that really supports your candidacy. You're going to emphasize the skills that match the job or the internship. And so the sort of the end result of that is, again, you really have to understand the job opportunity, the industry, the company, and use the right and appropriate and truthful terminology that ties into the specific opportunity.
And just as you can see in the red, the resume is a marketing tool. And so when you're on this internship or job search, you know, you are a product, and you have to see yourself as such. And with that comes, you know, materials, and they should all be branded in a certain way so that whether someone sees you in person and meet you in an interview situation or networking event, or whether they see your resume or your LinkedIn profile or social media, or, you know, any other way to see you, it all really should be very consistent. They should get the same feel about you looking at all of your, you know, or maybe it's an online portfolio if you're maybe more of a creative professional. It really needs to, everything needs to tie in. And so this resume is equally important as all of the other pieces, and it's really very reflective of who you are as a person and a candidate. A lot of people, you know, we're not going to spend time on LinkedIn today, but LinkedIn, you know, it's equally as important, if not even more, in this time, this day and age, as a resume. But the resume is still very much, it's very necessary and used to this day. So you have to see this resume as your advertisement of yourself. So it needs to be perfect. You know?
It's an example of your best work. Okay. Apologies. Okay. So before you begin, Andrea and I both mentioned in our introductions that we sort of took stock in where we were in life many moons ago to see where we wanted to proceed in our careers. And before you put that piece of paper together, it's extremely important for you to have a sense of where it is that you're going. As I mentioned, Andrea and I have looked at, you know, thousands of resumes. Many of them have been in you know, a setting where we're working with clients, and a client will come in and say, I'm looking for a job, and I've sent out so many different resumes, and I'm not getting any calls, and I don't understand why. And then we'll ask the client, well, what is it that you're looking for? They'll say, well, I don't know, I'm open, I'm flexible. Recruiters, hiring managers do not want to work that hard. They want you to tell them what you want. And they're going to assume that whatever is on paper is what you want. And so before you start putting things down on paper, it is important to think about, what do I want? It's not about what have I done, it's about what have I done that I enjoy and what I want to bring with me in my career as I move forward. And from there, you really need to think about, okay, so how can I, on my resume, reflect my personality, my interests, the skills I enjoy using, what's important to me, in a way that tells the reader who I am and what I can do for them.
Clearly, as a college student or new professional, you know, you're not going to have as many experiences to draw upon. Hopefully, you have internships.
Yes, or volunteer work.
Volunteer work, which is equally as important. However, there's still a way that you can showcase your skills and your interests, and we'll kind of go through that in a bit. But just keep that in mind, that you do need to be targeted and know where you want to go in order to get there.
And so once you've done some of that, and certainly you can work with a career counselor or the Career Center at Montclair State, What you then need to do is identify, as you can see on the slide, the different types of positions that are out there that would match where it is you're going. And every industry and company may call the same type of position a different title. So it's important to sort of have kind of a mix of different titles that you're targeting. In terms of companies, perhaps there are specific causes, industries. You know, there's a student who worked, Andrea and I, we both used to work at Seton Hall University, and there was a student who was a finance major but loved sports, and so he ended up getting an internship in the finance department at Madison Square Garden, right? So he was targeting sports-related organizations in terms of the types of companies. And I guess you could also call that an industry, sports and recreation. You need to, you know, you can't just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. It's important to have a bit of a focus.
So this is just an overview of a resume, and I do want to make clear that this, you know, we really have, again, we have an audience of all different experience levels, and so we're trying to, you know, really, this is a resume that might not, we do have an example of a resume in a few slides for specifically for college students. Mm-hmm. This one you can see, if you look at Carol Chun, mm-hmm. Clearly at the top, contact information. And I will say in today's day and age, it is not necessary to put an address at the top, as long as you put a phone number, specifically one that somebody can reach you at.
But you do want to, I would recommend putting your city, state, and zip. And this is really because you want to let the reader know that you don't need to relocate, or, you know, you're not expecting money to relocate. Just don't put your street address for security purposes.
And also an email address, and dare we say an appropriate email address, one that is professional and simple, you know, your name at, and I will say, for those of you who maybe are more experienced professionals that may not have changed your email for a long time, I will say that email carriers such as AOL, which I still see, even Yahoo, are a little dated. Well, they're not a little, they are dated, Gmail. And you should really consider going to something like a Gmail instead, just because it makes you look more current. Because, you know, those of you in college may not experience ageism yet, but you will get there. and Gmail if you're not using Gmail, that might show you're a bit archaic.
So you also want, if you're happy with your LinkedIn profile, in your contact info header, you do want to put your LinkedIn short name, which is, you know, linkedin.com/in/ however you've shortened that list of letters and numbers that LinkedIn gives you. As Andrea mentioned earlier, if you are a creative, you may want to put a website. Perhaps you have a blog or some sort of website where you've sort of cataloged your work. That could also go at the top. One thing about your phone number, and most of us use our cell, just make sure as you are sending out resumes, that your greeting on your cell phone number, your cell phone is appropriate. Just, you know, you've reached Jen Rodgers, or you've reached, and then your number. Please leave a message. You know, not a whole song and dance, literally a song and dance of some song that's out there. So just very simple and plain. As we move down, you'll see that there's a summary section, and you'll see we wrote in here that for, you know, on average 3 years of work experience after you graduate, you should have a summary. No longer an objective, no longer nothing. But we're going to talk more about the summary in a moment, but it's really an important piece of real estate for you, and we'll go into that in a minute or two.
You'll also, just if we go right to the bottom, you'll see education, and that's the correct place to put education unless you are you're a college student or new professional, brand new. Then education goes up to the top, because that's what you're doing right now. You're a college student, so it's most relevant, and you should keep it up top. For everyone else, the bottom. And then, of course, in the middle is just the professional experience. And, you know, there's all different ways to organize your experience. Some people will put, and this is, again, going to be maybe for someone with a little more experience, relevant experience, and divide relevant, meaning experience that is related to the job that you're looking for, and then other experience, and so there's different ways to do that.
Okay. It looks like, so someone has a question, do you need to put high school? In working with college students, if you're a freshman in college, you would put high school.
But other than that, absolutely not.
No. And I would say something tied to high school, if you're in college and if you are looking for sort of front office finance positions, many times recruiters will look for your SAT scores. But that's very industry specific. And so with that, you would, if you are in college right now and you are a sophomore or above, you would not list high school, but you would still list your SAT scores so long as they are what you believe the recruiter's looking for. Okay, so that's a good question. Okay. All right, so moving along. So summary. So summary is for someone who has 3+ years of postgraduate work experience. And the purpose of a summary, so now the example of the resume we just showed you was 1 page. Unless you have, I would say, 7+ years of very relevant experience to where you're going, your resume should be 1 page. More than 7 years, it may be a couple of pages. Certainly there are other professions such as medical, or if you're a professor or an attorney where your resume is multiple pages, that's more of like a CV. But your resume is 1 page, or again, you have a lot of experience, 2 pages. The summary is great for individuals with experience because it captures the reader's attention immediately. There are various numbers out there as far as how quickly, or how quickly a recruiter will look at your resume. Some say 6 seconds, some say 16 seconds. It's quick, it's fast, and they start reading from the top to the bottom. And so in order to catch the reader's attention quickly, you want to have the really marketable, relevant experience at the top. And this is where you showcase the key achievements and projects that you've worked on that are most relevant to where you want to go. And so we mentioned earlier, you may have volunteer experience, maybe extracurricular, work experience from a number of years ago, and that's all of that may be the type of work that you want to continue doing, but it's hidden. It's hidden in your resume, it's hidden in the middle, it's hidden at the bottom. You can pull that up and incorporate that into a summary about what it is that you can do. Okay.
So these are just a couple different ways that you could craft a summary. And notice at the top you'll see headline. This is for more experienced professionals where you have, the major area that you're headed towards, or it could be a title.
But you don't write the word headline on your resume.
Oh yes. You wouldn't write headline on your resume. We're going to show some examples too. But you can see this person, and this is sort of reflective of the LinkedIn headline. Mm-hmm. And so this is where both documents can sort of mimic each other and mirror each other. So the headline that's on your LinkedIn profile may be similar, so this is an international business professional, and then those areas are underneath that they want to sort of specialize in, and maybe some major elements about them, like they're an MBA, they want to get into, they've gotten their MBA at Harvard, and what have you.
Yeah.
And then under that, and you don't write the word paragraph, you would just have, this is just another example of a training and development professional, and they sort of give a summary of a brief, succinct summary of who they are with expertise in the design and implementation of cost-effective staff training, e-learning, customer service, sales management, and marketing programs. And notice this, recognized for innovation and creativity in designing real-world training programs that focus on development of core skills and competencies. And I say notice this because the word recognized for is really part of their brand, and it's what we do often with experienced professionals, and honestly you could do this even as a college student, and ask people, especially with LinkedIn, is ask people who know you and your work to tell you one thing that they value most about you, that you bring to the team or to the table in your work, and collect that information. I mean, I have clients that will reach out to 10 or more people, collect the information, see what feedback you get, and then incorporate that into the summary. So, you know, because there's 1,000,001 training and development professionals, there's 1,000,002 new college graduates that are looking for jobs, you know, and so what's going to differentiate you from your competition? And so when you can really pinpoint things about you that make you different, that are really, that you're, maybe they're innate skills or personality traits, that's what you want to put into this career summary. Just something that's going to make you stand out.
It's the, you know, it's the nice, it's a really great way to address the, well, why should we hire you and not someone else? What makes you the most qualified? Because companies don't only want to hire the people who can do the work, they want to hire the people who can fit into their culture, the departmental personality, and they really want the people who want the work. And if all these other individuals are saying that you do this work and you do it with a smile and you are the one that they rely on for that specific kind of work, that's a signal that you enjoy that work and that you're good at it and that others recognize that, and that's why the organization should hire you. Okay. So your bullets, the resume we saw earlier, the experience, the accomplishments within that experience, they were bulleted. And so when you're thinking about your bulleted accomplishment statements, you want to think about them in this format. Now, some of you may have been to interview workshops where they talk about, you know, behavioral-based interviewing and the way to think of open-ended interview questions and how you think about responding to these questions. It's very structured, and it's problem, action, result, or situation, task, action, result, or situation, action, result. There's so many, you know, STAR, PAR, SAR. The way that you format your bullet statements is very similar. And in this webinar, you've been provided, there's an attached document that is titled Creating Accomplishment Statements on Your Resume. That's a very straightforward worksheet to help you think about the things that you've enjoyed, that you're proud of, that you think are most relevant to where you want to go, that other people have commented on, and so on and so on. And you can structure it where you think about an experience, and maybe it's, oh, I remember I worked on that project with my boss. Okay, so what was the problem or what was the situation? And you write down the overarching situation that you were faced with. What actions did you specifically take in response to that situation? And you write down the actions. I worked on Excel, and I created this spreadsheet, and I did this, that, and the other thing, and I consolidated it into a 15-page report, and so on and so forth. And then you think about the result. So what happened at the end based on your actions, and you write the result down. And then according to that worksheet, you pull it all together, because what you're going to do is look at this experience and think, okay, what skills and behaviors are coming out of this experience, and what do I really want to highlight on my resume? And perhaps from this one situation or problem, action, results, you have 3 different specific and succinct skill areas that you can highlight. Well, then you have 3 separate bullets where you describe this project, because each one of those bullets really highlights a separate skill or responsibility based on this situation. And you start these bullets off with powerful verbs. And these verbs are going to be relevant to the industry, company, and profession you're targeting. And if you're currently involved in this situation, or this is something that you will be ongoing, you'll be doing again, it would be enter, right? If it's something that you're no longer doing, the verb you start with would be entered. No ing, no s. If you say entering, that screams job description. You never start with responsible for, it's too passive. And then when you go on with your bullet, you're going to sprinkle industry keywords. So for example, when I was transitioning from human resources to career counseling, instead of using a word like inform the candidate, I might use the word advise the candidate to make it sound a little bit more counsel-y. So you need to be strategic. So long as it's truthful, you need to be strategic with how you format this.
And I think what we also are encouraging you to do is, when it comes to the bullets of, you know, in your experience, what we see a lot of is very task-oriented bullets that sound like a job description, you know, like typed reports, filed paperwork, and then so on and so forth. And we realize that when you don't have a whole lot of experience, that and the experience you do have could possibly be, maybe it is a clerical type role, that well, that's what you did was file.
Mm-hmm.
But we want you to dig a little deeper and think about, maybe there was a project that you were assigned, and just really think about it's not just about the daily tasks.
Yeah.
It's about really more about, what did you bring? I mean, maybe it's you reorganized the filing system that they did have.
And how many files were there? And how did you reorganizing the files make the place better?
Or if you were, people say, well, I answered phones. Okay, well, how many people did you support? And how,
on average, how many calls per day did you get in?
Yeah, so it's telling a story, painting a picture for the reader, and thinking as much as possible about those things that were outside of the job description that might very well be the most important parts of your job.
We'll take a look at a college student's resume in a moment, so you can see a little bit more like what we're talking about. So this is an example of how to work this out. You can all read, so you all see this. And from this situation, there are numerous ways that this person could have written their experience, but they chose to write it out in the bullet that you see at the bottom, and you see numbers. And one way to really get the point across about the scope of your work, the level of responsibility, how busy you really were, is by putting in numbers, averages, percentages, ranges, things like that.
Quantifying.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just another message. It's, not only accomplishment statements with these strong verbs, engineered and implemented robotic manufacturing processes, but also quantifying and actually providing a number. And this could be done even, in how many phone calls, that were answered. So as much as possible, we realize that not every job is going to be as structured in the same way where you can quantify, and maybe we'll have people, well, I don't know what the numbers were. Well, then maybe you can estimate with percentages, or maybe you won't be able to quantify everything. So, but just know that in certain industries, especially like a sales role, or manufacturing, or certain industries are going to require quantifying your bullets. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, so now we're going to give you some experience formats that you can follow.
This is the experience section of the resume.
Mm-hmm. And this one you can see is more paragraph form. And we're showing you examples of what Andrea and I, what we've both seen. And obviously, well, first of all, the formatting is off with some of the paragraphs, but these are just sort of, this is a sort of a paragraph description of what this individual achieved. And the advantage is that it does take up less space. With bullets, you're sort of, it adjusts the formatting a little bit, so you're not optimizing your space. But the disadvantage is that your achievements get lost in the text, and your job is to make your resume not only as marketable and targeted to the opportunity, but as easy to read, because the reader, the recruiter, hiring manager, again, 6 seconds, 16 seconds, whatever that is, they're glancing at your resume and putting in a yes, no, or maybe pile. And if they have to work that hard to dig and try to find in your paragraph what you achieved, they're just not going to do it.
So the bulleted experience is really what Jen and I recommend, is bullet pointing your experience, because it is cleaner, it's quick, easy to peruse. You'll see disadvantages are, maybe everything has equal value, or maybe achievements aren't immediately recognizable, and we do suggest that you put the most important and relevant bullets up on the top. Right. And then those that are not as important towards the bottom. And so you have a little bit of control of how you want to, I guess, pull some weight on which ones are more important. But it's true that it's maybe it loses a bit of the value, but it is much easier to peruse, and that is really what your goal should be.
sorry about that. We just got the table moved. We'll go back to our
the bullet.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. One thing about bulleted, or actually I should, two things. One is if you're at the end of your bulleted achievement accomplishment statements, you're going to have periods. Make sure you have them throughout. You don't have to have them. And then the other thing is, I think we get this question often. Well, you know, I was trying to make it so that each one of my different jobs, I had the same or similar amount of bullets within each job description.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't matter. No one cares. What matters is that the information that you're providing on your resume is information that you want someone to see and that you want to do and that you enjoyed and or proud of. Your number of bullets per work experience does not matter if they match.
Yeah. Notice though that each bullet starts with a different action verb.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important that you're not repeating the same word over and over again. Notice, actually notice that there's a city and a state, of where your employer was located. That's very important. Where you put the title and whether you bullet it is really your choice, but bold it. So this one says business manager, and then underneath is the Smith Ag Production Company. You could switch the two and put Smith Ag Production Company on the top, and then the business manager at the bottom. Maybe you want to put your title in bold italics, and then the location, the employer, in all bold. So you're differentiating it, but letting it stand out. See, this is where there is some variety as long as you're consistent and do the same for every employer.
So,
I think you skipped one.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So here's one that many times
you'll see this
professionals
with more
who have
experienced
who
professionals.
have a number of years experience, they will sort of underneath their title and the name of the company, they will give kind of like an overview summary of their overall responsibilities, and then they will break it down into distinct achievements with bullets. This is fine. However, there are two things. One is it can take up a bit more space on your resume, and the second thing is that if you're going to follow this format, you need to follow this format with every different job that you've had. You need to be consistent throughout your resume. You can't do this once and then the next job you've had, you just use bullets and there's no summary underneath. So that's all we'll say about that. Okay, so this is a bit of a different format. It's one that, if you are looking at an industry that perhaps is a bit non-traditional or more creative, or you have
tech
industry, or if that's the kind of role that you're looking for, this probably wouldn't be a resume that an accountant or a financial analyst would use. You can see Jane Doe is a retail industry manager, so she's a little bit more into the sort of maybe fashion or what have you. Furniture looks like in Boater's World on her resume. But you can see, the resume tips, the numbers correlate to the numbers on the resume and just sort of where she's positioned. This format is fine. However, it's one page. This is a kind of format that's just a one-pager. And so if there's more information, if you have a lot of experience and a lot of it is relevant to where you want to go, you may not be able to fit this all in because you want to kind of respect the white space.
But if we're just glancing at this, you notice things that stick out. The use of bold, the use of this person. It changed the titles to the blue font color, and it's all caps. But when when I'm glancing down, I can easily, as the reader, if you put yourself in the shoes of a reader, you could really see everything very quickly, so it's clean, and as long as you can fit everything, then I think it's a fine resume. It has her skill sets on the right, and then some highlights that she wanted the readers to know about her. She has won 14 Branch Manager of the Month and General Manager of the Year awards. and then her education's all the way at the bottom. Maybe for a college student, it might be higher. It looks like we have a question.
Nope, it went away. Okay, forget it. Just kidding. There was a client that I worked with recently who had many years work experience. However, she really wanted to focus on her most recent experience, let's say within the past 8-9 years. So we did one traditional resume, the one that we've shown you earlier. That went on to a second page that showed some of her corporate experience, because she wanted some readers to know that she did work in the corporate world and understand how companies worked, because she was actually involved in grants administration, writing, and fundraising and event planning. But then she also wanted to target some newer nonprofits that perhaps had a younger workforce, and so we created a resume that actually looks very similar to the one that you're looking at right now, that didn't include her corporate experience, but really included her skill in grant writing and the amount of money she was able to bring in through that.
One other thing I just want to mention is that you will notice on this resume on the top right is her LinkedIn URL to get right to her LinkedIn profile, and you will even see she has a website. And so someone that maybe they have some things on their website that they want someone to know about them, maybe they have projects on there or portfolio, it is perfectly appropriate and fine to put that. And LinkedIn you should absolutely put on your resume.
So some dues that you want to make sure you have. You want to make. I think we've gotten the point across. Your resume needs to be targeted to where you're going. A scannable resume. So one that is, a lot of these corporations will use applicant tracking systems, or ATSs, where you apply online, your resume goes into a big old database, it's sort of converted into their database, and there it sits until the hiring manager is running a search for the right candidates. And so because of that, you want to make sure that you're not using a lot of graphics on your resume, that you're not using font that is a bit too fancy. You can use Calibri, Arial, Garamond. Those are some good sort of scannable formats.
Times New Roman.
If you are creative and your resume is a bit more funky, certainly you can use that when you go to in-person events like networking events, career fairs, interviews, informational meetings. But just make sure that when you're submitting something where you believe it's going into some sort of database, you take out a lot of the fancy information. We talked about quantifiable achievements. We talked about keywords that you may need to swap out, in or out of your resume, depending on the opportunity and the industry it sits in. You also want to make sure your resume is no more than 2 pages, unless you're in a profession that would warrant it, as we discussed earlier.
And no more than 1 if a college student or new professional.
That's right, 1 page. And we'll go over some parameters in terms of the resume and margins and things like that. And you also want to make sure a lot of eyeballs are looking at your resume. There are, Andrea and I we've been doing this work for a very long time, and we are very aware that people have different opinions of resumes, what it shouldn't look like, what it should have, shouldn't have. You will put your resume in front of 5 different people for a review, and you will get 5 different sets of feedback. That's okay. But you really want, when you want to ask people who know you well, is this resume showing my personality? You want to ask people who have worked with you, is this really effectively showing what I did achieve and what I accomplished? And then you want to have others give you feedback on, is this consistent? Are my periods okay? Is my formatting okay? Is my spacing okay? So on and so forth. Oh, we have a question. Okay. Oh, we've had the high school. Do you need to include the dates for education? If you are a current student, yes. If you have, it depends. If you don't want to date yourself, you can leave your education dates off. You certainly should list where you went to school and your degree and what have you.
But not your high school.
Not your high school. But if you are a current college student or you've graduated within the past, let's say 5 to 7 years, certainly have the year you graduated. But you don't need to necessarily call attention to how old you are. I know I don't list, the year I graduated.
And by the way, the date, if you do decide to put the date on, it's just the date that you're going to be graduating or graduated.
That's right.
Not the full time frame. You don't really need to have, from when you started to when you graduated.
Unless you are a transfer student. So if you're a current student and let's say you went to, I don't know, Morris County College and you went there for a year or you got your associates, you would list the span of time from what year to what year you attended. And then if you're currently at Montclair State, you would then list what year you started to present.
But then once you have experience under your belt, just because Jen brought this to our attention, if you did go to a community college and got an associate's, you can eventually drop that off.
That's right.
And just leave the Montclair State University because that's really where you got your degree. But right now, if you're in the middle of that and you're, just keep the community college experience on.
So the next question we have is, if in university and working full-time, should the education still be listed higher up on the resume?
Meaning, I guess, if you are working at the university?
No, just working full-time. If you're at the university and you're working.
Yeah, you should keep it up top because you're a student, you might be working as well, but you're still a college student, and yes, you should have it at the top.
Okay, especially if you're going to college to change your career, then it would be even more important, and up at the top maybe even describe projects you've worked on.
Yes, that brings up a point because if you are a career changer, then you would want to put education on the top if you're taking some courses or you're in a grad program that is going to be relevant to the new career.
So the next question is an objective necessary? It seems different people have varying opinions on this. Although I have the space for it, I'm a new college grad, would it hurt me to include one or should I get rid of it altogether? So my opinion is this. If your resume right now doesn't reflect the kind of work that you want to do, you need to have an objective. However, if your resume is filled, so let's just say you're looking for something in marketing and your degree is in marketing, you've had 1+ internships or volunteer experiences where you've been involved in marketing related work, then it's assumed you want marketing, especially when you're applying to a very specific position. But if your resume doesn't reflect what it is you're looking to do, you do need to have an objective.
Most college students, when you look at their resumes, will have an objective on it. I will say if you decide to have one on, that it really needs to be it needs to be specific about the position, or maybe it's for grad school, you're applying to grad school, as long as it's specific. What is absolutely, what we tell people not to do with objectives is to be so general and cliche about their objective. Just be specific. That's the only thing we'll say.
The next question is, if you have held multiple positions with the same company, do you recommend listing all of those positions, or do you only list your current position with the company on your resume? Do you want to take this one?
Sure. You would put the multiple positions. Now, okay, there's always exceptions. We've met people that have been in the same company for 30 years, and that might get a little bit too many positions. But in general, yes, you would put the multiple positions so that you can show progression. And especially if you've been promoted, so it will show that you are promotable, that people see and reward your work.
Those are achievements.
Such. And so yes, however, I will say at the top, when you list the place that you're working and you're listing the date range, you would put the date that you began your first position to the present, or maybe you left that position to the last date that you were there. So the reader can clearly see the whole amount of time, the full range of time you've been in there, even if it's been 5 different positions, okay? And then maybe if you wanted to list the positions, you can have those in parentheses, those dates that you were in those positions. But what I've seen that gets a little hairy is when they're at the same company in multiple positions, and then they put the company name, they list it like multiple times. So if you were at the New York Times and now you're a journalist, and maybe you started out as someone in the mailroom, you write New York Times, New York City, journalist, and then the dates, and then you go down further and it says New York Times, New York City, mailroom attendant, and it looks very choppy. You wouldn't have to write New York Times multiple times, just positions.
So the next question is, like the client you worked with who wrote grants and had corporate experience as well, Do you see objections in having two resumes if one is open to both careers? Okay, so the client who I mentioned, she was only looking for one career, and she sort of minimized her corporate experience, although kept it on her resume, but she didn't really elaborate a lot on it, and she really focused more on her more recent work that she had been doing over the past 7 years, which is what she wanted to continue doing. Now, if you want to have two different resumes, that's okay. However, you can only have one LinkedIn profile. So it's important to demonstrate a common thread as it relates to your interest. So let's say so you don't want to have two completely different career interests and try to figure out how to reflect that on LinkedIn. And so this is sort of a very specific, we would need to know more about your current situation to really get a sense of how to recommend what you do. But you can have two different resumes. That's absolutely fine, and you identify which resume you're going to use for which opportunity, and you send them out accordingly. That's okay, absolutely. As you know, you want to be as targeted as possible, but just make sure you have a story. You know, when you're networking and when you're going on interviews, that you have appropriate and convincible stories to the listener about what it is you want to do and why, because you have to convince them of your interest in that particular career. So the next question is, I took a leave of absence for an internship. I ended up coming back to the job. Should my resume show the lapse? Well, it depends on what you want to do. I mean, certainly you don't want to have a huge blank spot on your resume unless you're a college student, and not working for a certain amount of time isn't a huge deal if you're enrolled in college full time. Many students take some time off to focus on their grades as opposed to working. However, you said you ended up coming back to the job. Should your resume show the lapse? If your internship is relevant to what it is you want to do, certainly, and it would all be within your experience section, and you would just show the dates accordingly. What you would do with your current experience is you would show. It depends on how long the internship was. If it was only for a few months, you could have, you know, you're still within that company for that same year, that same calendar year span. And so you would list maybe your full-time job first and then your internship underneath, or whichever came first, because it's reverse chronological. But yeah, if your internship is something that you want to continue doing down the road, you would list both. All right, I'll read this, and you want to take this one? Mm-hmm. How do I format, this is the next question, how do I format my resume if I'm looking for a job and I'm changing industries and I don't have much experience in that new industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I mean, one thing I will say is if you are, this is for career changers out there or people wanting to re-enter the industry or re-enter the workforce. For this reason, it is important to get as much experience as you can, and that could be even in a volunteer capacity. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But for someone that doesn't have a lot of experience, you know, that's where this summary is going to really, I think, come in handy, because this is the place that you're going to be able to express this industry that you do want to target, and maybe be able to explain the skills that you want to leverage from this other industry into the new one. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I would you say that you don't have much experience in the new industry. I don't know what that means without really looking and talking to you, but if it is even something, that would be put to the top of the resume. So you could put either related experience, and maybe in a section, so that experience moves to the top, or maybe it goes in a place under the summary where you have highlights, and maybe you just put a bullet that says, you know, some experience that you have that is related. Mm-hmm. So it depends. I would have to look at it in person, but that's the gist.
This question is very similar, so we only have 10 minutes left. Okay. So we'll just, you know, so hi, I'm looking to change careers and want to highlight transferable skills in my summary. What are your feelings, thoughts on bulleting these? And I mean, bulleting within your summary is okay, but typically when you have bullets, you're actually it's an accomplishment statement where you're highlighting an achievement you made that shows your transferable skills. That's okay. You can also, as Andrea mentioned, you can have keywords that are listed under your summary, and we'll show you examples of those.
Yeah, we're going to show you. You could have a whole section called areas of expertise or core competencies, and then you'll be able to list them.
The other question is, when writing a resume for an internship while still in college, do you include relevant coursework? Yes, Absolutely. We're going to show, yes, absolutely. You don't, but you wouldn't list like, business communication, or COM 3000. List the name of the class, business communication, principles of accounting, things like that. If so, what's important to list? Describe. So you list coursework. You're going to list your GPA, your overall GPA. If your GPA in your major is higher, you list that as well. Also talking about projects, and we're going to show you an example of that as well. Next question, is there a specific way one should display self-employment? Well, you form it like a job.
Yeah, it would be your current experience, and it would be the name of, or maybe if you're a freelancer, or maybe you're a consultant, you would list, maybe you have some gigs, some freelance projects, and you can put it under a whole section called freelance, if that's what you do. Or if it's just one company, you would list it as you would any other employer.
So this question, we're not really going to get into it because that could be an entire other workshop, but it's about cover letters, and I'm applying to a job on campus, and it's required for me to have a cover letter. A cover letter supplements your resume. It is not a redo of your resume. What you need to do is look at the opportunity, identify 2 or 3 key skills, qualifications, and/or experiences that they're looking for. Then go back to your own experience, think about where you've utilized them or displayed those qualities, and then in your cover letter, describe how you've used those key skills. So you're telling a story, but we really don't have time to go, unfortunately, to go into that right now. All right, so let's get into some don'ts.
I think we covered a lot of this. Objective, we wouldn't recommend this unless you're a college student. And inappropriate email addresses, we've already talked about that. We talked about mailing address, that you would not put your actual street address, just your city and state. Multiple phone numbers, I mean, we just recommend one, and it's potentially, hopefully a cell phone that you will be answering. Because there's nothing worse than someone calling, an employer calling a home, and someone like a child is answering the phone and not getting the message to you. It's not an impression you want to leave. Personal details, maybe some interests or things about you, like date of birth, or
and you don't use possessives. I, me, I, they, we. No possessives on your resume.
Irrelevant social media accounts.
Tables. Do not use resume templates. They're nightmares.
Well, yes, especially when you want to go back and edit it. We suggest starting fresh with a Word document. Watching your fonts, your colors. I mean, clearly there's going to be some industries, like creative ones, that are going to be more open. Even having a logo on a resume that you've created would be absolutely fine. You do need to showcase some of your talent, but for the majority, really stay away from those fonts, and especially because of the applicant tracking systems that might not be able to read those fonts. Fluffy buzzwords, again, we don't want you to overdo. We want you to use jargon or terminology that is industry specific, but we don't want you to overdo it, and we don't want you to use words other than strong action verbs. Jen mentioned never use I or me in a resume. You can do that in LinkedIn, by the way.
And in your cover letter, obviously.
Or your cover letter, but not on a resume. You don't want to put salary history unless, for instance, the only one I think would be government, where they do ask, but even that is not very common. And too much of the past, we don't want you to go any further back than maybe say 15, 20 years. And there's always exceptions to this, because people will say, well, I want to go back into the industry that I was in years ago. Well, then maybe that's a situation where you could put it, but otherwise you don't. And you do not need to say references available upon request at the end. That's a bit dated. You should have references and ready to go on a page, that you can bring to an interview just in case they ask, of people that know your work and know you, but you don't need to write this on a resume.
All right, so we have 5 minutes. So let's just go over some resumes. So this is actually a current student. In terms of margins, for whether you're a recent grad, current student, or an experienced professional, your margins should be a half to a full inch, half an inch to a full inch, all the way around. This is clearly, the margins are not here because we expanded this resume so that you could actually see it, but you need to have margins. Your font size should be anywhere from 10 to 12 point. Now, see the education's at the top, Okay, you can see on the right under education, expected June 2019. She's not a transfer student. She's just stating when she's expected to graduate. She's listing her honors and awards. She has that coursework we mentioned up there at the top that's relevant to where she wants to go. Her projects, she is highlighting her projects like they are jobs. She is starting with good buzzwords. She is incorporating data. You know, first class on flight 1000. Oh wait, it's down here. Examine financial statements
This
of
is
two
under
companies.
financial accounting group project number 2.
And then she's talking about calculated total current assets to total asset ratios. What she is doing is she is using terminology for finance. She wants to be an analyst, so she's using that type of terminology.
And how do you know what terminology to use? Go into the websites of financial firms. Go into job descriptions of financial firms.
Look at people's LinkedIn profiles for where you want to be within the next 3 to 5 years and see what terminology they're using. And as long as it makes sense and it's true for your specific experience, then you can use it. Now, just down here, just in terms of work experience, you can see she worked in like after-school programs. These are not sort of internships or big, quote-unquote, very important jobs, though I would say they're important. She was working with kids. That's extremely important. But she's quantifying. She's talking about under Chung Pak, her first work experience, supervised classroom activities of 20 plus 4th and 5th grade students. So you're imagining how busy she is. Supervised, helped, adhered, converted, collect, participate, selected, engage. She's using all different verbs to describe what it is that she's done. She has her volunteer experience. Her leadership activities are separate from her volunteer experience because she wants to highlight how she's been a leader.
And skills are at the bottom. For someone with more experience, skills you may want to put them more at the top in your summary area.
Okay.
Now, we're just going to very quickly go through, there's different kinds of resumes. The typical resume that the majority of you should be using would be a chronological or reverse chronological resume, meaning from most current position to the past. This is just an example of, you'll see it's simple. It has summary of qualifications. She decided not to write a paragraph format. She's just bulleting them to give highlights of her qualifications. It's not a very long summary. And then she gets right into professional experience. You'll see she bolded all of her titles. And then you'll see everything it's all consistent. The dates, she decided to put, month as a number and then the last 2 digits. And, and she was consistent with this throughout. And her education is at the bottom. And this is for a more experienced professional.
And you can also see that she has all of her, in terms of her headers for where she's worked, all on one line. Her title, the name of the company, the city, state, the dates. She did that so she could keep it to 1 page. If you want to fill up more of the page, you can use the 2 lines as we've shown you, where it's the title, the date she held the title, the company on the next line with the city and state.
This is a functional resume. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this other than to tell you that this is one that would be most often used by a career changer because it's highlighting functional areas of expertise, as you can see with the arrows, the types of administrative management, bookkeeping, customer service. I will say this, employers look at functional resumes and tend not to like them. We wanted to at least show you that they exist. They're really not recommended, even for career change, just because it doesn't really have the dates. It's hard to read and gets a little confusing for the reader, but they exist.
Okay.
This is just another example of one of these, modern resumes. You'll see something that you would never have seen in the past on resumes, which is a picture. In this day and age of social media, pictures actually become almost required on LinkedIn. If you don't have a picture, you're going to be less apt to be read. So, you'll see that they exist. It's fine. We don't always recommend it. There's certain industries that are more, it's a better fit for.
This is, we admit, a bit busy on the top, but what we really wanted to do at the summary section is to really just show you different ways you can format your summary. We do not recommend having all of this, the paragraph at top, the blue rectangle, the tables underneath the blue rectangle. We don't recommend having all three, but these are just ways in which you can, swap in or swap out different sections within your summary to optimize your space and draw attention to different highlights, especially if a lot of the information you have in your summary is contained, let's say, on page 2, where someone hasn't gotten to as of yet.
But someone asked about, some of the skill sets that they wanted to highlight. You can see under the blue section, she has marketing segmentation and campaign leadership. These are 2 areas that she wanted to highlight, and under them are skills.
Oops. I don't know why that keeps on happening.
Yeah. Bear with us. There you go. And so that's another way to put it. You could also call an area, a section of a resume, core competencies, and just write, certain skill sets that you feel are relevant. And then you'll see she did a combination under Syndicated Hong Kong Ltd. She put sort of her title and a blurb, and then she put bullet points under that with milestones. And then this is a combination of sort of a functional and chronological. And again, probably, honestly, the ones that we really think are the best are those reverse chronological, traditional resume.
There are no questions.
And maybe aspects of the last one we showed you. This one, aspects of it. Maybe it's a bit busy, but there are parts of this that are really very, that really tell a lot about Corinne. And then, of course, we can't end this without showing you. This is called an infographic resume. This is definitely going to be more popular with some of the startup tech company, maybe some ad agency kind of marketing, graphic design roles, where you can see this looks like, a one-page flyer, marketing piece, where, they have just really made it into a visual, and it's kind of cool, but this is definitely not for the most people, but absolutely it's out there, it exists, and this might be great for a creative professional.
So it looks like we may have 1 or 2 more questions. I don't know if we have time for this. Hold on 1 second. Yes. So the question was, will we have a copy of the deck? I see it. It's already up there. So thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar on resume development. Today's webinar was recorded, and it will soon be viewable on the Career Services website. We've also shared our PowerPoint, as mentioned. It's under the Handouts tab. And just thank you for being active listeners and the questions. It makes it more interactive when it's just sort of us sitting here without seeing your faces.
Yep. And Jen and I can be reached. Our website is www.turningleafcareer.com, or our email address is turningleafcareerconsulting@gmail.com. So Turning Leaf Career Consulting, all one word. You can ask questions on that space, or if you are interested in learning more about what we do.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.